Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode of Supernatural Girls. I'm your host, Patricia Baker. I am here with my lovely co host, looking beautiful as ever.
You sweet talker, you.
Hey,
I'll pay you after the show.
you look great. You really look beautiful tonight.
you.
So tell us, we've got a great guest tonight. As you know, Peter
Yeah,
Champoux is here. He
we
hasn't been here in a while,
I
but
know,
we
and
said,
he looks good too.
looks fabulous, very
Together.
distinguished. Yes. And he's got some great stuff to tell us. I cannot wait to hear from him tonight.
Yes, he
And you're
does.
all going to be thrilled to hear what he has to say, I'm sure. It's all very exciting stuff. But first, numerologically, where are we in the universe? What's going on?
It's a month of changes. It's a day. It's all about our finances. So lots going on at this time. And get involved with communications of all sorts that's happening now. But stay your direction. It's a 5 months, so it deals with major changes, good to bad, bad to good, but it does have a luck factor to it. The only problem with the 5 month is we do everything in a hurry. So you're going to hear about more accidents. People are speeding, doing things in a hurry. Act in haste, repent in leisure. Remember that one?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of luck available to us when the 5 is around. And so slow it down just a little bit so you can enjoy what's going on. But it's all about major changes. And anytime we have major changes, and particularly this day, today is all about our finances. So if you get a chance, maybe you decide you want to partake of a lottery or something, it might be a good day to do it. Just a thought.
Good. All right.
So,
Well, that sounds like a fun thing to do.
well, why not?
Definitely.
We
Yeah.
stand a chance like anything else. It's
Right.
like a friend of mine called. She said, I just had a chance to count how many of these little goofy balls. And I said, goofy balls. They said, those things that you suck on that the kids buy. You have to guess how many are in the container. And if
Oh,
you
yeah.
do, you win it the amount that you've guessed in dollars. So she was all excited. She thought she had got it. Somebody beat her by one.
Oh, no.
No.
She was so close. Oh,
Yeah,
gosh.
she was watching the ching, 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 and then all of a sudden it was one right past her.
Oh, gosh. That's
But
too bad.
everything is quick fix right now. And I do really want to stress, pay attention to your driving, people, because
Mhm.
there's a lot going on universally. These kids and their road rages and their whatever you want to call their gang get-togethers and streaming through streets in the large
Yep.
cities. They're doing it here in my town as well.
Oh,
And
gosh.
God, be careful. Somebody's good people are going to be hurt because somebody thinks they're a smart ass. Bottom
Yeah,
line.
that's not good. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's
Try
covered
to use your heads, people. Common sense. But that seems to be in short supply.
Yeah.
But anyways, well, look, we've got to get to Peter tonight right away.
Yes, we do.
Very, very interesting information. So let me tell you, those of you who have not met Peter before, he is Peter Champoux, Rock of the Field. He's a
Mhm.
world-class geomancer who has devoted his life to the question of Gaia, the living earth. In this quest, he has developed an organic, worldwide earth grid based on Gaia's own shape forms. He's been a guest on many podcasts, including ours, and he has authored 4 books on the evolution of his original material. He hopes that someday his research will help humanity live symbiotically with the earth in an environmentally sustainable relationship with Gaia as a harmonized field of consciousness. Would be great, wouldn't it?
Mhm.
Peter, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Pete.
Well,
No,
it's
2
so
Patricias. Yeah, PK
I always go by PK. It makes it easy
and
for her.
PB. Oh, yeah. Hi.
The 3 Bs.
Thanks for having me.
That's right. The 3 Ps now.
Yeah.
Your work is outstanding. You're one of the very few that we've had on the show that knows anything about this.
Mhm.
And your maps. You've been to my property specifically and
Yeah.
informed us what was lying underneath it, what kind of faults we had. And you also talked about the energy that created. That was very helpful information because, as you know, this town has been fraught with conflict from the very beginning. But you pointed out why, that there were these stress faults, and that creates stress for the people who live here. And so you either learn how to manage it and make it work for you, or you really are under its spell in some ways, right?
Yeah, that's it. People, place, purpose. We are affected by our
Yeah.
environment above and below our feet. So, looking at all that, that's the job of the geomancer. Kind of like it was the first form of geography, I guess. I like to call it gaiography, a study of the living earth, because although it's rock, it is living. There are energies within it. Like I said, in your case, there was that stress fault there that, it creates an extra amount of piezoelectric energy coming up into your field, and if you're not, processing it, then it builds up and, sparks off, that type of thing. So it's a language of metaphor. It's something I've, I guess I was born to it. Rock of the Field is my name, and it's kind of that's how I got into it. If you translate Peter Champoux into, it's actually Champoux in the French Canadian, but it's of the field, meaning, geez, we were farmers back then, like everybody else,
Right.
So. Identity crisis 18, what am I going to do? Who am I? And Rock of the Field looked at my name and came to Stonehenge. And what about Stonehenge? And then I got into the ley lines after that. And in my tweens, my father and I were amateur paleontologists. So we were cracking open rocks after work every day, or in my case, school. And we would mine dinosaur footprints out in the Connecticut River Valley. So that there was this, we first found these prints in the rock that came out of our family foundation. My father built his own house with GI Bill and all that after World War II. And so we found dinosaur footprints when we were blasting for the foundation. And I was conceived the first night there. At the new house, so they called me Peter after all the rock they dug out. But that kind of signature of living rock, there's a rock with a print in it, and we actually found dinosaur footprints that you could pour latex in and pull out an actual foot of a dinosaur.
Oh my goodness!
It was pretty wild, 250 million year old stuff. We had a whole cellar full of the stuff, but that just my curiosity just kept going. I was born dyslexic, kind of a class dunce, if you will, early on. And when I was around 15, it was when, LSD started going around our school system. So when I took that, I think the two halves of my brain came together and started to work together. And I just got this insatiable curiosity after that. I couldn't stop reading. Before that, I couldn't even read, So
Oh my goodness!
afterwards, I'm like, give me another book. And it's been quite an adventure. And it's guided by spirit, I guess. I tried to leave it behind, and when I did, I'd actually run right back into it. So I just kind of like, well, I guess I have something to do. And I worked as a stonemason. I was into sacred geometry, to create sacred space, and so I looked into the cultural use of stone, how temple building, pyramids, everything, anything to do with stone, which is there's rock is when it's in the ground. When a human touches rock, it becomes a stone. So it's kind of like,
didn't know that.
It's kind of like a transformational act, I did that for 25 years. I was a stonemason and noticed that there is some splitting. If I used the angle of that was native to the rock, I would get a lot more done during the day. If I fought that, then I'd be fighting it all day. So I saw that the same crack that was in the native rock was reflected in the river system that it was part of. So the branching of the rivers had that same angle to it. I was also a map reader for some reason too. I was into that as a kid, and so it got combining that sacred geometry and building and geology. I said, well, if there's sacred geometry in flowers and everywhere else in nature, in our own bodies, why not in the planet too? So I started looking for something, and of course I found it. Because you find what you're looking for, when you're a pattern maker.
Mhm.
So I was looking for some geometry in the land, and I found the triangulation of mountains up in Vermont, New Hampshire. That pointed down to Shelburne Falls. And I just continued, with sacred geometry, you just keep fleshing out the angles from whatever is presented in front of you, and it becomes something. So there was a doubling of a triangle, and that reached out to Boston and Canajoharie. Canajoharie is where the Iroquois Confederacy started. That's the eastern door of the Confederacy, and if you made a circle out of that, it went through New Haven and Providence and New London. It just created this cultural matrix, and I wrote a book about it called Gaia Matrix, and about that discovery early on. And then I was going around doing workshops about it. I was all excited. I thought I'd completed it, but
here you are with new information.
Yeah. And Tippy Halsey, she's passed now, but she had this Light Gate Center up in Thetford, Vermont. Went up there for a workshop, and nobody showed up, but there was this big space where I could put all my maps out. I didn't have the space to put all my maps down, and so she said, well, if it's expanded that far, does it expand farther? So I said, well, maybe. So I took that center point at Shelburne Falls, which was the center of this Gaia Matrix, and realized that if you brought it out to California, Mexico, that arc that's in the western edge of our continent, that arc is referenced to that center. So every radius creates a certain size arc. So that was really the basis of this whole study that I've done for the whole planet, looking for arcs in the landscape that actually suggests some geometry. Part and parcel of that are great circles, which are circles going around the entire planet, like the equator, their equatorial lines. So that's kind of the conversation tonight, are two of those large scale lines.
Well, what's so interesting to me is how you explained how the energy of the earth, where I am, was affecting the whole town in a negative way if they didn't know how to work with this energy. And you also determined that it was Precambrian rock, which is one of the oldest types of rock that's here.
Yep.
It really always mystified me why this town was so contentious. We're surrounded by other small towns. Why aren't they like this? But you pointed out, here it is. And it wasn't just one stress fault. It was, I think, 4 or 5 stress faults. So it was a huge...
That area that you're in is right at the border between old and new North America. That stress fault was part of the mid-Atlantic rift that we have now that's out in the Azores. So like everything east of that demarcation line is 250 million years old or less. Everything west of that line is like 3 billion, and so it's like timelines too, and where am I? Which side of reality am I on? So it's
Well,
all this metaphorical conversation that you could have with
yeah,
that.
but it's also so helpful. I mean, I found that incredibly helpful, and I know that's something that you offer to people to go to their property and look at it and say, this is why things are the way they are, because we've become rather disconnected from the earth, and we don't understand our relationship to it. And I think that's
Yeah.
really behind a lot of what you're trying to change here. So it is so important to see how it affects us. Why, for example, are the people in my town so affected or so, you know, caught up
Mhm.
minor conflicts that seem to escalate? So how does it happen? Why? And it is very much related to the earth energy that we don't know what to do with overall. But now you've identified something profound, and this is the Jesus alignment. So you talked about there are two great ley lines. I'm just reading from your
Yeah.
information here, that course through the Middle East. One cursed by an ancient Egyptian priesthood, which sounds like them. They used to do that stuff. and the other is blessed by Jesus of Nazareth. Both vying for our attention. So tell us about all of this. It sounds very stressful.
Yeah. Yeah.
To say the
So ley lines, alignments of nature and culture over a distance. That comes out of England with the standing stones and such over there. That was where this guy Alfred Watkins noticed that along the Michael Mary line of southern England, where there were standing stones and circles and churches and fords and fairy forts and everything, that there were a lot of place names that had LEY at the end of it. So it must be a ley line. So that's where the name came from. And the English, are kind of like the ley lines are theirs. Ley lines don't exist outside England. So I call them LEI, like ley that you get when the flower,
Yeah,
because there's a
right.
lot of volcanic structures along these things.
Right.
So that's the job of a geomancer, really, is to find geopathy. Like in the case of your town there's some geopathic energies that need to be corrected. And, there's a lot of different geomancers have different techniques to take care of those things, often, pegs in the ground, either wood or metal or something of that nature. But there's, so in line of, okay, what's going on with Jerusalem? That was my big question. Why, why is there such trouble there? And why are there so many wars there?
Yeah,
and so I picked up this book on the Dome of the Rock, and in it said that there was a curse that was placed on the Canaanites by the Egyptians because they couldn't crack Ashkelon. Ashkelon was an old Canaanite city just on the northern border of Gaza. And so the curse kind of read, the curse read that if you rebel or think of rebelling or act, to any kind of way to rebel against the authority or the invading powers, you would fail and fail miserably and die, and just how curses go.
Yeah.
So they found these curses written on bowls that were broken. So in ceremonial magic that they were consummate at the time, they'd been doing this for a few thousand years.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing.
This magic. So they broke these so it wouldn't be undone. So I started looking. Well, that's interesting, and so I looked at I saw that Ashkelon, it was not so far from Jerusalem, and I put I used a map and put a ruler down on it, a Mercator map, and I noticed that there are all this alignment of cities along it. Amman, Jordan, Baghdad. I don't know if you can, Baghdad, Iraq, Kabul, Afghanistan, Islamabad, Pakistan, and the arc of the Himalayas have 2 points on either end. It's like a necklace. The Himalayas, and east and west, their ends are both contended border zones over on the Far East is where China is now damming the Brahmaputra River with this idea of diverting that towards China, which is going to create another war over that, because all of China or all of India depends on the Brahmaputra because it feeds their main rice fields. And, it's like, so
let me ask you, Peter, I have a question because you talked about the high priests in Egypt, and we all know what they'd love to do this kind of dark magic and other things. But my question is this: is there anything that you look at in that area and go, oh, this is the perfect area to have these types of ceremonies, dark magic or any kind of magic rituals? Is there anything about that area that is sympathetic to that or amplifies that?
Well, it goes. This has really got me into, kind of like, it's excluded me from the conversation, if you will, because I think the whole reason all this is happening is because of the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid is a 3-dimensional lock from a 5-dimensional or 8-dimensional or 9 or whatever dimensions. It's where the ultra-dimensional archons or demiurges or whatever lock into the planet. And you look at the Great Pyramid and look at the ley lines that emanate from the Great Pyramid. You'll find warfare happening everywhere. You find genocide happening all around the Great Pyramid in these very coherent rings that radiate out from the Great Pyramid. And, I've written about that and, I got an article on my website on that, but it's, so, there's a lot of people are making a lot of money off the Great Pyramid. And, and the contention, they say, well, it feels so good there. Well, of course it feels good. Venus flytrap really is attractive to a fly, and so having consciousness focused on that is empowering the Great Pyramid. When it was ignored, it didn't have so much power, but so I think that's so one of the alignments goes up through where Mount Carmel is. That's where Elijah battled the priests of Baal, who were human sacrificers. They were the whole reason why the Egyptians were so mad at the Ashkelanis was and the Canaanites was because they worshipped a monotheistic God, which was outside of the Ma'at, M-A-A-T, the order of the universe. So they wanted to put an end to this monotheism because, it was kind of, it spelled the end to them,
right. It would take away their power. Yeah.
Right. That whole dysfunctional family that is the Egyptian pantheon, it would be, in the dust. So, but that monotheistic impulse that was coming into the world, is a precursor to Christ coming into the world, and Christ coming into the world is like a battle against good and evil. So I was looking for a solution to this, and it seems like Jerusalem would be the solution. And the solution, of course, if you think about Jerusalem, it's like, well, it must be Jesus Christ and his work and sacrifice and all that was, and I just started looking at that at that alignment, and I'd stayed away from, I didn't want to get involved with the Great Pyramid forever. North America was my thing, let the Geomancers who are into Egypt go there. I'm not that into it, but it just kept nagging at me. So, and this alignment led me to this. So we have this dysfunctional war line, this endless war that's going on, and it goes through Fordo, Iran. So it also just tricks on this Iranian thing that we have going here. So it's like the demiurge is at work, and it's working towards stimulating that which feeds it and its minions, archonic. The Gnostics spoke of the archons. You probably have talked about that in the show before, and they feed off of human emotion and suffering. So the more of that happens, the more luge is made. That's the kind of conversation of the Gnostics.
Yeah.
So the more wars, the better. The more wars, the more the Christ impulse gets suppressed. And so where does this line go? Well, it overshadows this Christ alignment that I'm particularly excited about. So I came up with the Christ alignment. Well, I look at people's paths, and that's kind of something I do. It's almost like service work because it takes so much time to do it, and I don't charge enough for my time, but so I don't do it so much anymore because it just takes so much, getting involved with people's lives.
Work. Yeah, and it's a lot of work. Definitely.
Yeah. So I finally, like the Great Pyramid, I didn't really want to get involved with, Christ Jesus because there was so much baggage or, emotion or, judgment or, the people, it's like, he kept things so open.
Yes. And I hear what you're saying, but I want to take you back to two things. One, there was a book written by Paul Brunton called A Search in Secret Egypt. And he traveled through the Valley of the Kings, and he all of a sudden met up with a master. And the master said to him, look, you have to tell these people to stop opening these tombs because these were all magically and ceremonially protected. You open these up and you are releasing these dark energies, and they are going to cause trouble everywhere on the planet, and nobody will know that it came from this. So you need to stop doing this. Now, along with that magical element, which is quite powerful, there's the jinn. All right. Now, information that came to me about that is very unusual, but that the jinn were not meant to be ruled by men. They were supposed to be working with women. Underneath men, it becomes something else. So then you have that element in that whole inferno. So you've got this, and this is why I'm asking too, is there some big magical circle that allows these energies to exist there comfortably and to come through powerfully?
Well, when I first came across this archon geometry, I called it, what I heard in my head, it was really one of those moments where, you cry and laugh at the same time and curl up in a ball in the corner, what is this? I was, what is this I came up with, we're on New England, this Gaia matrix. And I heard very clearly archons, and it's like archons. I had no idea. I'd never heard of them before, and then the internet wasn't around. I hadn't studied Gnosticism or nothing. And so I just, they must mean archome, so I went with archome as the name of this geometry I found. But I think that they're, the demiurge is this serpent being that has it's like controls the earth. And I believe it uses these form patterns that I've discovered. These deadly ley lines are at circuit around the planet. So the whole planet it's no particular spot. It's circulating, and these archons are drawing in from all directions. It isn't one specific place. I suggested that they have an energetic tie to the planet through the Great Pyramid, which is center to one of these earth rings that I've discovered around the world. And that earth ring is the size of the Earth's inner core. So if you have, and there's 12 of these earth rings that are the size of the inner core around the planet that are kind of, it looks like they're projections out from the core onto the surface. And then the ley lines, the big great circle ley lines circulate throughout it, like Ezekiel's wheels.
So it carries this energy, and is this how the archons then navigate and feed off of our negative energy?
Right. Well, there's these deadly ley lines are focused alignments where, like one of them goes through the Franco-German border, just forever. The wars that go down through that way, and it goes through Kosovo, and it goes through, you find these ley lines, and there are often a lot of violence along them, so it's like this focused feeding zone, if you will, but it's very serpentine. It has that great Ouroboros kind of, snake eating its tail quality about it.
Right. I guess what I'm looking for is, because it is an area of aggression, of high aggression. And I don't want to say it's male energy, but you know what I mean.
It's patriarchy. Sure it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. Didn't want to insult anybody. But at the same time, I'm like, well, why is it so concentrated there? And yes, I agree the archons are a factor. They're a factor all over the place. And we need to get in touch with ourselves and quit feeding them with our constant loops of negativity. They love that. That's their food. They love to see us suffer because they feed off of it. Yeah. We have to stop doing it. And the shamans are very good at controlling that energy within themselves. But so many of them have died off and we haven't been able to benefit from their techniques and their trials and tribulations with the archons, but they clearly identified them as a major problem. So I'm just looking, is there, that's creating all of this fighting, aggression, patriarchy? It just doesn't seem to want to stop. Yeah. Why?
Well, similar to where your stress fault was there's a stress fault that goes through the Jordan Valley. That's, it's where multiple continents collide. Europe, Asia, Africa, are all kind of come together at that one point. So it's like it's a pinch point. It's an omphalos, if you will, but it's in reverse. That's the Jordan Valley. The Dead Sea is 1,400 feet below sea level. It's the deepest point on the planet. So, archonic stuff, locking in deep. That's where Sodom and Gomorrah was historically, they say, is within that Dead Sea Valley, the Jordan River Valley. So there's a lot of memory of that, of dying and destruction and degeneracy and everything all within that. So it's like that evil needed to be redeemed because it was held deep in the consciousness of the planet. It was being drawn in by that depth, into the inner planet. So when Jesus came to Bethany across the Jordan, where he was baptized by John the Baptist there, he having that descent of the Holy Spirit into him, into the water, it went into the world itself because of that depth and that stress fault that's there. There was a crack and opening that allowed for his grace and the grace of the Holy Spirit to enter the world. So, to get into the Jesus alignment before we run out of time is that pathway, is like from baptism to crucifixion. That's that aquatic line that runs through the center of Jesus's heart there in the screen. So the Jesus alignment is between where he was baptized and where he was crucified and resurrected. And so the line between the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem and where he was baptized is the Jesus alignment, essentially. And between those two places, you'll find Bethany, where he raised Lazarus. It goes through the Garden of Gethsemane. It goes through the porch of the Gentiles. That's the white line in this, is the Jesus alignment coming in. It goes through Gethsemane. I was just learning today that there's speculation that Pentecost actually happened right on the Gentile porch there in the temple grounds, as on that same line. So, any ley line that has, it's worth its stuff, and, it has to have other connections with it. So drawing outward and drawing that same line using Google Earth as my tool for these mapping. And I said, well, I'll just stretch it out as far as I can and see what's there. And I came across this mountain called Mount Kailash, which is this very holy mountain in the Himalayas, Western Himalayas. It's a pilgrimage spot. It's honored by 5 different religions, like Jerusalem is honored by all these religions. So there are the only 2 places on the earth, where you have this type of group consciousness field that agree that, this is a holy place. One is up high and one is real low, if you will, down to the Jordan Valley. And so, okay, well, that's interesting. Well, what's in between there? And with the ley lines, you look for beats, like, is it halfway? Is it 1 to 2 proportion? Is it a phi proportion? What's on the phi line? And, things of this nature. So I looked at the half distance and found that spot in Iran is where Ahura Mazda received the light of, or where Ahura Mazda sent his light down into Zarathustra and started the whole Zoroastrian religion. And then a little farther, westward is where Ezekiel had his visions of the wheels and the dead coming alive. So you have all these like soul developments, if you will, along this alignment. From Shiva, and that's where Buddha went after he died. With Nirvana, his Nirmanakaya, moved in with Shiva. And there's a number of other, religious characters that live in Mount Kailash. And the Magi, when they came from the east and brought those goods to Jesus so that he could go down to Egypt. The first thing, when he was born, and say, let's go to Egypt. He had to kind of like go down and work with that energy, because that's what he was transforming.
But why is there today? I mean, after all of these things that happened, there were many sacred moments, and why is it still? I mean, the feeling that I get as you describe the energies of the earth there, it's like it's tense, and it's almost feels pretty equally balanced. It doesn't feel like one side can get ahead of the other. It's just like that.
Yeah, stalemate. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm left wondering, what is it going to take, or is it possible to rebalance this in such a way that we have this return of the sacred energy across the land, and not this what we have right now, which is rather frightening. So,
well, a lot of this gets released when it comes into the conscious awareness of the collective community.
okay.
I mean, faith is what drives religion. It doesn't really have to be anything, any truth at all. It's just if there's enough people that have faith around what they believe, it becomes that. I know that there's a lot of false religions and false prophets out there that have, and there's a lot of people that have taken Jesus's teachings and twisted them around, and but it's collective awareness. It's consciousness, and being a like these archons and demiurges, they have to operate in the darkness. If they're in the light and people know what they're up to, it's like, oh, the game's up. They'll chop off a few heads. I've had it done a number of times in past lives. But
Peter,
yes.
I was curious to one thing. We talk about the stones, etc. What about the soil itself, the sand and the earth itself?
Well, that's a real interesting conversation there too. Limestone is underneath Jerusalem. Limestone is underneath the Giza Plateau. Limestone is underneath the south of England. Limestone is underneath Teotihuacan. No, it isn't. That's volcanic. But very much a lot of sacred sites are around limestone. So is that because sacred sites could have been easily built because of the ease of use of limestone? But I prefer to think of it as a living rock. It's the closest thing to life that's solid. Mm-hmm. It's full of shells, made from shells from. But there's with limestone, it's a dielectric rock, and granite is a piezoelectric rock. So the two of them together generate a conduit, a field between the two. So the Great Pyramid has all that granite in the middle of it, piezoelectric, with all the dielectric around it. So that those two, they create a waveform between the two that speak to the land, and it's also very much water, saturated with water. So having that below the surface of a sacred site, activates that sacred nature of water. The geometry, over in the lower right of the Jesus alignment is this geometric that I came up with based on the water molecule. And it's in my stuff. You can get a better picture of it. Mm-hmm. But it's essentially shows how the Great Pyramid is a solid form of a water molecule. So the form of it's actually locking into the like this is the bonding angle of the Great Pyramid. It's the bonding angle of water. So that locks the pyramid into the biosphere of the planet, which is watery, and communicates that through the watery fields. So, as far as the site goes, the Great Pyramid is perfect for what you were describing. What is the best place to, do this type of release and, but it's tricky.
You talk about the two different energies coming together. Piezoelectric. What was the other one?
Dielectric. Yeah.
Dielectric.
Electric and dielectric. Yes.
Okay, and it creates a waveform. Do you know what kind of waveform? I mean, is that something that you could tell us about? What kind of waveform does it make?
Well, the south of England had all this limestone, and they brought in all these standing stones, which were electric. So the electric dielectric. So they created these charges between the two. So before, you can't spread cow manure over the entire southern England. So, in order to fertilize the land, they use these megalithic constructions to improve agriculture, and that shows in the archaeological record of human bones that the bones actually got better with the introduction of the stone circles during that period of time. So it's researchers, agricultural researchers, biodynamic researchers have found that by putting granite on one end of a bed and limestone at the other end of the bed, inside a tube, that frequency between the two generates growth, and increased growth within the plant life as compared to the bed next to it that has the same nutrients in the soil.
Amazing.
So. What effect does it have on human consciousness? I would imagine it's quite profound.
Well, human consciousness, is based on glial cells, the ganglia, the cottage cheese of our head, which is all limestone, and the center of our brain is electric. The hippocampus. The hippocampus, connects our two halves of our brain, and this, well, it's actually flipped this way, and the third prong goes out right through the third eye. So we're limestone, and so that's how it affects human consciousness. You got the pineal gland in the center. You have blood system running through it, which is iron. So that's electric, dielectric, kind of thing going on between the two within our own bodies.
Yeah, I think there's so much to all of this that we still don't understand. I mean, there's what you're talking about. It just feels like I want to keep going with it, because there's much more that we need to know about that. That's more. We're not gonna let you go easy.
You need a big Band-Aid for around the head.
Tonight. Yeah. There's something about this that I think is truly important, and we can continue this conversation later, I'm sure, but there is something there. And because what I'm looking at again, and I know PK and I've had lots of conversations about the aggression that's going on, that it's always seems to be simmering under the surface, even if it's not full blown. Now it's full blown. And again, we're looking for what we can do. What energies can we connect to? What energies can we help to expand that would bring this aggression to a different place?
Well, I think the answer is in Jerusalem. That's where Christ ended up. So I'm taking his lead in saying that that's the spot that we gotta deal with these archonic entities at that place, and that's why it's being fought over so desperately.
Yeah.
It wants to stop the spread of consciousness and the evolution of the human soul. And keep it in fear, and keep it in greed, and all those things that feed luge to these entities. And if we cut off their food supply by being loving and kind to one another, that game's over. But Washington is on one of the Washington D.C. is on one of the deadly ley lines, and so
Wow.
that demiurge is sending signals and currents into there's we're going into the Great Lakes.
Yeah, that's up near you, right?
Yeah, it's a whole planet worth of stuff that we could cover, but there's a lot of there's a lot of places around the planet that are critical. Washington D.C. is a critical place. It was fractured soon after it was built. It was created as a temple space. With the DC diamond, and right after it was built, Virginia wanted to leave. So now it's cracked in half like the Liberty Bell, and the river that went through it that's you got to have a river near a city in order to have its vitality be part of that. It's kind of water, holy water, and everything. So. I mean, they were very, 77, like exactly 770.00000. Washington, D.C. was placed right on that longitude line. So that's referring to England. England is setting the fourth dimension by setting the zero prime meridian. It's setting the language of the planet. It's setting the fourth dimension of the planet, which is time, and that has to do with like the Darwinian economics that we have going on now, and all this stuff. And London is like a well-known Rothschild place, and so it's like they're setting the frequency for the whole planet. So that's another place that needs to be worked on is London. And we have all these, Islamists that are running around trying to take over these places and trying to take over these sacred sites. And pardon me, please don't cut my head off. It's like, come on, grow up and, kind of look at what you're doing here. But, one of the ley lines that comes off of the Great Pyramid the southeast ley line, that's the edge form of the Great Pyramid, goes right to the Kaaba, right to the Kaaba, right to that stone that everyone bows to. So that's part of the pyramidal complex, So what they're bowing down to are those old gods, are those dark figures that you spoke of that were released from those tombs that have taken up residence in the Great Pyramid. That's, I mean, it's a direct current. And, I don't know, I know at one point the Islamists tried to, take apart the Great Pyramid. It was just too much work and left it.
Oh, thank God. Can you imagine?
But, it's very complicated. And kind of more than I can take care of and do, So I'm just saying, look here and look there. It's a great mystery, and let's solve it, and let's try to figure this out.
I have to tell you, there's more to what you're doing. And I'm going to go back to my own experience, because the identification of the ley lines, the stress faults, etc., brings it into our consciousness. And that's what you're doing. You're bringing all of this information to our consciousness. And I can only say that after you came to my property and you shared this information with me, and you were very specific about it, I was not going to go into all of what we discussed, but it changed things for me, because I was able to understand things differently from the perspective of what is here and how it affects people. So what you're doing is you're giving us this information about the Jesus alignment, about what's going on with the Great Pyramid. That's now in our consciousness. We now can understand this with a better perspective and a wider perspective. So your work is really important, because you're changing our consciousness and our audience's consciousness just by talking about these things. We don't necessarily have the answers, but we now have more awareness.
Yeah, very true. And it takes a village to figure this one out. I'm just pointing in the direction. There's a lot of consummate ceremonialists out there and in churches, that can direct prayer. If they know where the problem is, they can, we're being, these are puppet master lines, this deadly ley line that goes through, I call it the Silk Road ley, because it kind of, there was Genghis Khan came down through there, and Alexander, and, the empires go to die in Kabul, Afghanistan. And, so it's been there forever, it's like, it's a puppet master string, we got to cut that string, and that's done through awareness, just bringing it into the light of day, and this, being aware of this Jesus alignment that comes off of Mount Kailash and goes to Jerusalem. That's a beam of light that comes right down and crosses the Silk Road ley. You can see how the lines are kind of converging there. The Silk Road ley and where the Christ alignment ley intersects are right very close to where that curse was laid down. So it's like there's this healing that can happen. There was another thing that was split destroyed. There was these broken bowls, and the broken bowls have to be kind of like, in a consciousness brought back together and reformed, like that Japanese technique of using gold to repair a cup, and then put slip form on the inside of those bowls to cover up the old curses, that whole thing is, that's part of it, is to, like reassemble it and negate it, as a ceremonial thing. But to do that, there's this, this is an illness. This is a snake that's biting the people and killing the people. So, what's that? That's called the Nehushtan, which is when the Jews were out in the desert, they were, like complaining, the food's lousy, manna all the time, and we were wandering around the desert, give us a break, Noah, Moses, and give us a break,
Right.
God, and so they were ungrateful, and God sent all these serpents down to, and they were biting the people and dying. So God said, they say, oh, help us out, Moses. So he erected this pole and put a copper serpent on top of it. So that's called the Nehushtan, Nehushtan, and it was a symbol of healing, like Caduceus or whatever. That was in the Temple of Jerusalem, the first temple, and this guy Hezekiah destroyed it, broke it, and soon afterwards the Babylonians came, So this curse it was an infection, if you will. First the Ashkelons came, got the curse.
Right. But let me
they
just
were
stop
taken over by the Egyptians. The Egyptians then. Are we running out of time?
Yes, and I wanted to share a couple things. One is it's really important for people to understand that this thing about, well, we got to love other people, that's not the important part. It doesn't start there. It starts with what is happening, our relationship with ourselves, which is out of control. Our relationship with ourselves is where that negative conversation that feeds the archons is going 24/7. So, hey, if I just tell everybody, look, if you want to help to stop that, that's where you got to stop it, is inside of yourself. You're running a script. You're running this negative stuff. You're so used to it that you don't even think about stopping it. But that's where it has to stop, in my opinion. That's where the real power is. That's where we take charge of our own Kundalini energy, not anybody else, not our relationship with them. It's right here. And that's the thing. Isn't that the Christ energy is about? It's inside.
I believe that's the answer right there, is bringing, Christ in you, having that relationship, that's what Christ came to give us, sovereignty, and give us,
that's the key word.
The Christ
right
is in you, and it's like, recognize that, acknowledge that, and live with that. That's,
Well,
that's
like you said, they've changed and twisted a lot of the teachings, but yes, the sovereignty aspect, that's a very important word that you just said tonight. But Peter, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for raising our awareness.
Thank you. It's always fun.
It's tremendously healing to hear everything you had to say, and to make us more conscious about all of this and our connection to the earth. So I do want to say something, because we're out of time, and we talked about this at the beginning. Unfortunately, one of our dear friends in this community has passed away, David Wilcox. I did get confirmation from his dear friend Corey, unfortunately, that it's not a rumor. It was true. So we want to extend our deepest condolences to David's friends and family. Quite a loss. He was a very large figure in this field for all of us. And again, he's gone on his way to the next destination. But anyways, I don't mean to end on such a sad note, but I did want to acknowledge him and the work that he did while he was here. And we certainly will reach out to his friends and family as well personally. So anyways, but Peter, having you here tonight was just a tremendous blessing.
Definitely.
Yes. Very, very much with angels on your shoulders. Thank you. So
thank you, precious.
Thank you again. And then guess what? We'll be back again. You guys just can't get rid of us.
No,
Us great mothers are going to be back next week. So we're coming back next week with one of our favorite readers, Deborah Graham, the wild woman of psychic mediumship, will be here, and we will be taking your questions. The phone system is operational, so we will be taking your questions. Deborah will be responding, so be sure to join us. It's going to be a wild show, I can guarantee it. So until then, everybody, we love you. We love you. We love you. And we'll see you on the Blue Highway. Good night, everyone.
Good night.